Hey everyone, thanks for tuning into today's video. We're going to have a look at the weather for the next 8 to 10 days in today's video. Now, things are starting to get a little bit interesting as we're heading towards the middle part of January with the models. There are some hints that we could turn things significantly colder from the north. Whether this comes to anything or not, we're going to have to wait and see. But I'll show you the charts in a second. And they are all sort of trending in the same direction, which is to start to bring down colder air from the north sometime around the middle of next week and going through towards the middle of January. It could just be a little cold snap, but it could be something a little bit more fundamental than that. So we'll have a look at the charts in a second, but very on with that, just say about the AS. Links articles all the page at Gaslow. Let's have a browse through widgets and click through the links. If there's any articles that you're interested in, thanks very much for doing that. There's also video out of most pages which open out with the content when you watch them. They'll close back up again. It's helping to pay for our website. So we've got the Arctic Oscillation observed and forecast chart here. The black line is where the Arctic Oscillation has been. The red lines where the GFS ensembles are forecasting the Arctic Oscillation to go. Now, the Arctic Oscillation is an index that reflects the state of the atmosphere over the North Pole. It isn't driving anything, it's just an index that's sort of telling us what the atmosphere and what the weather is doing. So we've got the dates on the bottom of the chart. We can go back to September with this. You can see that really since around the middle of October, just here, we've been positive with the Arctic Oscillation. So we've had a long run of positivity, culminating, of course, in this exceptionally mild December that we just had, record-breaking the mild December across England and Wales. The trend now is down, so the Arctic Oscillation has just about gone negative and going to continue to trend downwards by the look of it in towards the middle of January. So this is 16th of January just here. You see most members of the GFS ensemble are negative with the Arctic Oscillation. This is telling us that we're going to have some sort of blocking over the Arctic. Where exactly that blocking is sitting is going to be the critical factor. I think there's going to be plenty of it over the Canadian side, some of it over the Russian side. Whether it quite lines up, though, to give us a colder phase through the middle part of January is going to be the big question mark, really. As I always say, it's where blocking is sitting that is critical, as well as getting the blocking in the first place. So I think we are definitely going to see some blocking over the Arctic. We've already got a bit, and it'll probably strengthen over the next few days over the Arctic. But whether that quite lines up right for us is going to be the important question. The North Atlantic Oscillation, which also is an index reflecting the state of the atmosphere in the North Atlantic this time, that's going down towards neutral. So again, you see that we've had a long run of positivity with the North Atlantic Oscillation since, again, around the middle of October, very positive with the NAO through much of December. Now we're trending downwards. These red lines are going down more or less towards neutral, but slightly onto the negative side. Not as strong a signal as with the Arctic Oscillation. So this could be one of the complicating factors. We've got the Arctic Oscillation indicating quite a lot of blocking, but the North Atlantic Oscillation perhaps not quite as much in terms of shifting things into a colder pattern. So that could delay and complicate things quite a bit. But nevertheless, we are moving towards a much more interesting phase, I think, this winter as we're going up into the middle part of January. This is the 500 millibar height anomaly flow chart for the next week to 10 days. We've got the ECMWF on the top, and the GFS is down on the bottom. 500 millibars, 80,000 feet is an area in the atmosphere where high pressure, low pressure are being moved around by the jet stream running above. Red is extrapolating to high pressure and blue is extrapolating to low pressure. So we can see what they're doing for us. They are both placing quite a deep trough right over the top of the country, indicated by these blue curves. They're also signalling a shift southwards in the jet stream within this trough. So the jet stream is trending southwards, certainly allowing somewhat colder air to begin to penetrate down. Even if we don't get a really cold spell, I think we will see a cooler phase coming up through this January compared to what we've had in December. And then we see that they've both got all of these red colours here over top of the pole and extending down particularly towards the Canadian side. So quite a lot of blocking here up to the north of the country. That will be feeding cold air down into western parts, into central, western, eastern parts of Russia. Many parts of Russia turning cold with that. Also going down probably into a large portion of America. It's just how far southwards we can shift the jet stream and this trough for us that will determine whether we can start to tap in some of this colder air for us in the next 8 to 10 days. This takes us up to the 14th of January, so around the middle part of the month. But certainly very interesting that we've got so much red appearing to the north of the country. So the GFS temperature and precipitation ensembles are looking like this for the next couple of weeks. The red line here is the 30-year temperature average, so we're around average at the moment, a little bit above, and that's generally where we're staying into or through the first week of January into the second week. And then it's really from around middle part of the month, so this is the 13th of January just here, but we're starting to see loads and loads of scatter coming in. So several members of the ensemble are keeping it really quite mild, several members are going really quite cold, so and some are in between that, so a big amount of scatter there as we go through into the middle part of January, just indicative really that the model is not sure quite how much cold air is going to start to push southwards as we get through to the middle part of the month. There is, however, a generally downwards trend, I think, with the ensemble. So they're probably going more, well, it looks very scattered, they're probably going more towards colder, I think, around the middle part of the month. You can see that from the white trend line, which is just here, that generally the trend with that white line is downwards in the middle part of the month. Now, lots and lots of rain coming up over the next week to 10 days as well, so it's going to remain really wet at times with a bit of an Atlantic onslaught. After that, maybe a slight drying trend, although it isn't completely dry by any means, but it's not as wet, if you see what I mean, going through to the second part of January. But it's really the temperatures that's quite interesting there for the middle part of the month, because I think there is overall, and it is very scattered, so it's hard to make much up, but I think overall there's a very slight downwards trend with the temperatures. The temperature normally for the coming week, the 4th of January through to the 12th, looks really quite cold across Scandinavia and western parts of Russia. Below average temperatures well and truly set in there. Elsewhere across Europe, generally still milder than average. For the UK, we're just a little bit above average, not as warm as we have been by any means, but most of western and even some central southeast parts of Europe still looking a bit milder than average. This cold air that is in the northeast and has got down into the southeast of Europe at the moment will be pushed back again as we go through the course of this week, but it's going to cling on over Scandinavia and western Russia. The precipitation looks significantly wetter than average through most parts of Europe except for Scandinavia. Western Russia, where it's coldest, is also driest. So this is the latest GFS, a 6 o'clock run, and this is for Friday, when we're still in an Atlantic-driven pattern. Got a deep trough of low pressure in the Atlantic, bringing in westerly, southwesterly winds, so bands of rain and mild temperatures coming through. That scenario keeps going into the weekend, so weekend looking unsettled with showers along with spells of rain, and generally on the mild side as well. That trough starts to shift eastwards over top of the country as we go through to the start of next week, still generally mild, and then as we go through to the 12th of January, the trough begins to move towards the east of us, and that starts to allow colder air to begin to dig in from the north. Notice the black line, which is the jet stream on this chart, that is trending southwards, so things are starting to line up northwest to southeast in terms of the jet stream, and that's beginning to allow this cooler, it's not cold at this stage, but cooler air to start to push down from the northern part of the Atlantic Ocean. Then things get very messy as we go through towards day 10, which is the 14th of January, Thursday the 14th. So we're seeing signs of some ridging to the north across Greenland. We've got a trough of low pressure across Scandinavia, keeping it very cold there. A ridge extending through the UK and milder air trying to come back in of the Atlantic. So there's quite a battle going on here between mild air that's trying to cling on to the south and southwest, and these colder temperatures, the colder air trying to come down from the north. Beyond day 10, the GFS actually does turn things really quite cold. These are the upper air temperatures for day 10, showing that even then the cold air is generally in across many parts of Europe, the British Isles included. So this beyond day 10, this area's low pressure runs in across the country, possibly bringing a snow event to central northern parts of the country. Then that low pressure clears away to the east, and we firmly go into a cold pattern then, with the ridge across Greenland and extending down into the central part of the Atlantic, opening the floodgates to this much colder northerly wind through into the second half of January. So that certainly does imply that we're starting to turn things significantly colder as we move through to the middle part of the month, but it could be over the top. The ECMWF, again, for the weekend, it's generally mild, Atlantic driven and unsettled, with further bands of rain coming through the country. That takes us into the start of next week as well. The second part of next week, so this is from Tuesday the 12th, begins to see that low pressure again shifting eastwards, starting to allow colder air to come back in from the north. It's not as extreme with this as the GFS, but nevertheless it is turning things colder through the course of next week. We finish up on day 10, the 14th of January, with low pressure sitting to the east, the ridge out to the west, and the jet stream trending northwest to southeast, allowing colder air to come down from the north. So again, this does very much imply that next week sees a change, starting off quite mild, Atlantic driven, turning colder through the course of next week. That's probably more of a cold snap though than a cold spell, like the GFS is indicating. And then finally, the Canadian model, which is the GEM, again very Atlantic driven for the end of this week and into the weekend. Going to be really unsettled with bands of rain and generally quite mild temperatures as well. Tuesday, Wednesday seems to be the change next week, as this trough is shunted eastwards into Scandinavia and Central Europe. That starts to open the floodgates to these northerly winds, and we go through to day 10. This is day 10 as far as we can go with the GM. Again, same sort of idea. The trough is to the east of the country then. The ridge is out to the west and the northwest. That opens the floodgates to these northerly winds. That does turn significantly colder across many parts of the country. If we have a look at the upper air temperatures finally for the 14th of January, you see that the cold air is down across most parts of the UK. So it looks like we're going to get a cold snap. I think there's fairly good agreement there actually, although it's a long way off and we'll never be 100% certain when we're talking about weather in the 8 to 10 day time frame. Between the GFS, the ECMWF and the GEM, there's good agreement here for a cold snap developing next week. So I would assume that sometime around the 13th, 14th, 15th of January we'll get some northerly winds and probably get our first significant cold snap of this winter. Now, whether this extends into anything beyond that, whether it's just a cold snap, last 2 or 3 days, and then we revert back to a westerly flow and it turns milder, or whether this is the start of something more significant in the fate of this winter, we're going to have to wait and see a good deal longer on that one. But certainly I think the signs are there that we're going to start very wet and mild over weekend and into the start of next week, then have a cold snap through the middle of next week. Where we go beyond that, watch this space. So starting to get a little bit more interesting for cold and snow lovers. Haven't had much to interest you so far this winter, but things beginning to get just a little bit more interesting now. I'll keep you updated. That's it for now then, and thanks for watching.